Hi, good morning. Today I thought I would make this a little bit different by instead of writing down the observations, I want to make a quick video to at the same time demonstrate the dashboard and how some features could be used to really get very good insights. This is going to be more of a kind of a technical demo, so intended for technical audiences. But if you stumble upon this and you know somebody like a friend or a family member, either in the military or in the counterintelligence fields, like somebody maybe from the FBI or MI5 or Mossad, those kind of organizations, please consider forwarding this to them, this video, because it might be interesting to them. So today I'm gonna present this dashboard, and I'm gonna play with some of the features that it has. Let me put it here. So I should probably give a quick background information on how I got this data. So what happened was, over the last few years, some years, I've had this conflict with these people from the PayPal mafia, where every time I do a startup, they would kill it by doing different things. But one of the things that they do is that they attack the websites on Google, so to suppress them from Google searches. And the other thing that they do is that they spy on all our communications, email, internet connections, everything, to steal the code that we create. And I didn't know this back then, but like three years ago, I picked up running as a hobby, right, to exercise. And I started noticing that every time the conflict with them escalated, and the conflict with them escalated in different ways, but it was always surrounded the online positions in Google. So, for example, if I made a startup that was selling a product, they will create thousands of fake news and suppress my website that way. And I created certain technologies to try to defend it, but that created a conflict, right? A confrontation with them that lasted years. But anyhow, I started noticing that every time I went jogging, when the conflict escalated, I started noticing that there seemed to be more people in the areas where I was running, right? And I live in a very very suburban area. Like if you go running at 10 a.m., usually there's nobody on the parks, because kids are at school, people are working. I work from home, so I could go jogging at 10 a.m. or 10:30 or 11, and it was usually empty, the park. But I started noticing like 3 years ago that every time the situation escalated with them, a lot of people showed up to the park, right? At the exact time when I was jogging. And I would do things like vary the time, and the same thing happened. Like it didn't matter what time I went running, but if the conflict was at a peak, then there would be a lot of people at the parks, right? And then I started like switching places where I would run, and I saw the same thing. Like if the conflict was a low point, there would be nobody in the park. But if the conflict was a high point, there would be a lot of people in the park. And these people were like always intercepting me at places where I was forced to reduce my speed. Like for example, if I was running and I came across a stop sign or a traffic light, they would intercept me there. And when I say intercept, what I mean is it's usually a pedestrian, right, that is doing something like walking a dog, or something that justifies the pedestrian being static, right, or close to you for a period of time of a few seconds. And they would try to position these pedestrians next to me at very specific places. And this is what led to to me getting this data. And it's kind of a long story, but to make it short, I started noticing that they would always intercept me at the exact same places, right? So if there could be multiple stop signs where they could intercept me, but they would always very consistently trying to intercept me in these 2 or 3 stop signs specifically, right? And then if I switch the park and went running to a different park, the intersection points, of course, would be different, but they were always consistent. Like they were always trying to intercept me at the same places. So that, that kind of woke me up a little bit that they might have been following me. I didn't understand at that point why or what they were doing, but eventually, right, through observation, I figured it out. To make the story short, because they were so consistent in the points where they were intercepting me, I figured that this was an effort coordinated with an application, like an Uber application, right? Like a social media, like not social media, like a social economy app, basically, that would coordinate these people to follow me. I didn't know why back then, but I could see that there was coordination through computing means, and because I work in software and I've worked in software for a long time, I knew that this application must be using an index. Okay, this is called a geo index. It's a digital representation of places. I thought that the index would be stored in the application itself, like because that's what you would naturally do, right? Like if you're distributing an application like that, you would store the index if you can in the application and distribute it with the application, like via the Apple Store, for example. But I understand now that they cannot do that, because this is a criminal enterprise, right? They cannot put the index on the on the Apple Store because law enforcement would see it. Like if there's an audit or anybody tells anything, eventually, right, law enforcement could capture the index, so they cannot put it there. So what they did is that they put it on the internet. They hid it on a obscure server in France of a kind of a university or research institute. It was hidden on the file, but the reason why it was a mistake is because, well, I saw the places where they intercept me, so I knew the coordinates. So what I did, I started doing Google searches for files that would contain these exact coordinates, right? Like imagine that if you know that you are being followed and intercepted in 10 specific places, think about it, right? What are the chances that a file on the internet would contain the coordinates of these 10 specific places, right? It's null. Like, if you find it, it's because, well, that's the file they're using to follow you. So anyhow, I started doing the searches and it took me like 5 minutes to find it. I found it. I downloaded a copy of the file, and once I downloaded it, it took me like 4 hours to decode it. And it's a huge database of billions with billions of locations stored in it, encoded in it. And this is a good segue to talk about this. So the way they encode these locations in the file, they use encoders, okay? And encoders is a system that basically takes an input and represents it in a different way. And this is done for one of two reasons usually. One could be to save a space, right? Like, so you could encode things to make the file or the data take less space, so you can store more data. And the other reason is obscurity. Or security. I don't want to say security, it's more like obscurity. It means you represent the data in a different way, so it's not obvious to people if they find the file, like I did, what it's storing that file. Okay, and I think that's the reason why they did it. It's more obscurity than size. But anyhow, once I found the file and unloaded it, I understood what it was, and I decoded it. And then what I did is that I built a search engine that basically connects to that or ingests that file and ranks scores and ranks all the locations represented in that file to basically understand the importance of the locations. Think about it as a search engine, as a Google, but instead of ranking web pages, it ranks the locations that are encoded in that file of them. After I'm able to rank and score and rank the locations, I use that information to basically identify people, companies, key players on this. Because along with the locations, I mean, they store in this index not only the locations, but they also store metadata about the location, meaning they store markers and important information that is important for them, but that gives me an idea of the importance of the location, right? The relative importance of the location. And also I join this data with public data sources. So for example, imagine that there's a house marked in the index. Well, that house usually has public records attached to it, has an owner attached to it. That owner has a LinkedIn page, so I can tell, or the system can tell. So all this is automated, right? Like it's a pipeline that I developed that does all this at a massive scale, planet scale. So, the pipeline, for example, finds a potential location that is represented in their index, and then finds the public records associated with that location. If the owner has a LinkedIn page, for example, they would look at that. If it has social media that is publicly available, that can be used as well. And with all that, the system derives a series of signals and ranks the locations. So it's a way for me to systematically be able to understand what are the important locations in this network, right? And then with that, there's a lot of information or intelligence that can be derived from that. So I'm saying all this because in the topic of the encoders, they use multiple encoders for this system. They don't have one, they have multiple encoders. And so I'm going to talk specifically about two. There's one encoder that encodes locations that are related to intelligence, to intelligence services, right? So what they do is that they employ intelligence services of other countries. I imagine, I don't know what the arrangement that they have with them is, but obviously they're employing agents from other countries. I don't know if they lease the agents. I don't know if they directly employ the agents. I don't know. But there's one encoder that encodes, for example, properties that are associated to the agents that they employ. There's another encoder that encodes things related to telecommunications equipment, like antennas, right? The specific locations of certain antennas is marked in the index. There is another encoder, which is the one that I want to talk about today, that encodes what I believe are military positions. And I have dozens of reasons to believe this. I'm not going to get into the details of why I think this way, but it's pretty clear to me that these are really military positions, which brings me to the realization that this group, besides being a criminal group, a criminal enterprise, they are also a paramilitary group, because what they're doing is that they're employing military personnel, that have military knowledge, military techniques, tactics, and military equipment to target civilians, right? There's no difference between these and the guerrillas in Colombia in the 80s, right? Now, if I think of that, I think it's interesting in the fact that it's kind of a new situation, because this might be, and I don't know, I'll have to review the history books, but this might be maybe the first paramilitary group that doesn't have to face the military, right? Like in every single case that I can think of, the paramilitary groups that I know of had to fight with the legit military, right? But in this case, they're basically they formed a paramilitary group to target civilians, and they don't face opposition from any military, right? In fact, they employ the military of other countries. So I think it's a very unfair fight, and I think that's probably why it has gone undetected for 2 decades, right? Because we civilians were not equipped to fight with this, and even if you think of police forces, they're not equipped to fight with a military force. They would lose that fight, right? And this is a paramilitary group combined with intelligence services of other countries, right? It's a very dangerous combination, and so I think I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think it's a rather cowardly stance, to to employ intelligence services of other countries, combine them with a paramilitary group basically, and then use that combination to target unarmed civilians that are not even aware of what's happening, right? My hope is that they face, an equivalent force to see what would happen, right? If they had to face, say, the U.S. military combined with the FBI, right? It would be an interesting thing to watch to see how well they perform in that case, right? Well, anyhow, so in my dashboards, you'll see in the website that I have two types of dashboards. Ones that have a white background and ones that have a black background. And this is color code that I have. So the ones that are white are dashboards that are related to counterintelligence, right? So these are dashboards that represent intelligence, so the data derived from the intelligence encoder that they have, right? Where they encode the intelligence positions, the agents, the safe houses, those things, the antennas. And then the ones with the black background, like this one I'm showing here, are the ones that are related to military positions. Okay? So today I'm going to demo this dashboard. It's the same dashboard. It's only the two different pages that are on the top. So the first one, the one on the left is the first page, and the one on the right is the second page that I call Musk qubits. I'll explain what that means in a second. This dashboard is the biggest data export that I've produced so far since I captured their geo index. This dashboard, this export has 1 billion with B, so 1,000 million military locations encoded in it, all derived from their geo index. So this is not. These locations are not coming from anywhere except from their configuration file. So I want to show a few of the features that I put in this dashboard to show the power of this. So first, there's a filter here that has featured locations. Okay, all these filters that you see that are marked with this yellow color. They have one thing in common. One is that, the two things in common. They have labels on the left, and then they have these numbers on the right. So these numbers, I should go back for a second. So when I build this search engine that I described that scores and ranks the locations, that scoring process happens by producing a score that I have given a name to that score. I call it the Musk Kalanick Thiel Omidyar Evil Score, to honor these geniuses that came up with this evil machine. And so that's an important component of my counterintelligence system, is this evil score. It's equivalent, like if you're curious about it, you can maybe go to Wikipedia, which is theirs, by the way. They own Wikipedia. But you can go to Wikipedia and look up the Google PageRank algorithm. Look at that explanation. Well, the PageRank score, it would be the equivalent to this Musk, Kalanick, Thiel, Omidyar evil score that I'm computing. So that would be the analogy. But so that my score is in this, applies to this data set, not to web pages. So. Right, so if you see in these filters, you have this list, right? So on the left there's labels, on the right there's numbers. So these numbers represent the sum of all the Musk, Kalanick, Thiel, Omidyar evil scores that are contained within the constraints of this arbitrary label that I've put in here. So for example, if I clicked on Venezuela, and I think I have it open here, yeah. So if I clicked on Venezuela, you see feature location is Venezuela. You can see how the points are distributed. And what I wanted to say is that this number represents the sum of all the evil scores that are within the boundaries of that label, and they're sorted in decreasing order. So this is super telling, right? So this right off the bat tells us that of all these labels that I put in here, and I put here some interesting labels. There's Russia, there's Iran, there's Germany, then these are countries, right? World powers even. And Venezuela has more evil score points inside of it than Russia, than Canada, than Iran. Look, if you compare that, I mean, if you put it in perspective with any metric, like economic metric, socioeconomic metric, geographical metric, population metric, whatever, like there's no explanation for why there's so many evil points inside of Venezuela, except the geolocation, right? That's my theory. Is that they use Venezuela as a router to route communications, traffic, network traffic from North and South America to the west coast of Africa and the east coast of Asia and Australia. Right, so the geolocation of Venezuela makes it so it's an ideal routing point, and we can see in the data right here that it's probably the most important routing point in their communications network, which I imagine is one of the reasons why Venezuela, which is my country by the way, I was born there, has suffered so much in the last 20 years, right? Like they needed to capture it to build this abomination, right? Anyhow. So, but the point being that, when looking at these filters and the ordering of the labels and the numbers on the right usually gives you very good insights of what's going on. Now, going back to the one that I had in here, so I made it so when you open the dashboard, it's going to be pre-selected with two locations, Austin, and the Tesla Gigafactory in Austin. Okay, those two locations. And I want to take the opportunity to show something that it's an important thing that we need to know. So look at this. If you look at the list, so I'm selecting the Tesla Gigafactory in Austin and Austin. Okay, but you see, like if you look at the numbers, it says that Austin has 800,000 contained within it. And then the Tesla Gigafactory has 2.6 million. Okay, so that's 3 times more than entire Austin. But it's kind of counterintuitive because if you think about it, right, like the Tesla Gigafactory in Austin should be contained within Austin. So you would expect that the score of Austin be greater than the score of the Tesla Gigafactory. And that's not the case, it's the opposite. So that's what I want to explain, that there's a subtlety here. Is that the way this attribution system works is that, for the labels, I mean, is that it's like when it finds a label that matches the criteria, it stops, meaning, and it's like a top to bottom approach, right? So meaning, if I have a certain criteria for the Tesla Gigafactory, whatever that criteria might be, if it matches, then the evil score gets attributed to that, and then there's no more attributions after that, meaning Austin will not get any attributions from anything that it's already attributed to the Tesla Gigafactory, if that makes sense. And this is to avoid situations where you may have things like double or triple counted, right? So that's the reason why you will see this observation where the scores within something within the superset, so a subset, has a higher score than the superset, right? Which is counterintuitive. But that's the reason why. Now, the other thing that you can see is that, and this is an important observation, is that the evil scores that are represented in Elon Musk's and Travis Kalanick's geo index that are marked inside of the Tesla Gigafactory in Austin are higher combined than the entire city of Austin, right? In terms of the military positions. So that I think that's very telling of who's calling the shots on all this, right? And the same with the Berlin Gigafactory, which I have here on the fourth position from bottom to top, right? If you see, it has a combined score inside of 153 million versus, for example, the entire city of New York has not only, it's a high score, but it's 116 million. It's lower. So what I'm saying is, the evil score contained in the Tesla Gigafactory in Berlin is higher than the entire city of New York, right? Higher than the evil scores contained in the entire city, military scores, in the entire, city of New York. So, what are the chances that this observation holds true for 2 of the Tesla gigafactories. I mean, this is not a random. And I could keep going with Tesla factories, and it's the same observation all over again. All of them have, I just didn't put in here because I didn't want to pollute the dashboard with all Tesla gigafactories, right? But I did the exercise. I saw the scores of I don't know, all of them. And all of them had scores that were higher than entire cities, important cities for them. So, it's concentration of power, right? Like ego. That's the explanation for this observation. Okay, it is what it is. So once you change the filters, for example, in this case, I can select only the Tesla Gigafactory, and everything in this, all the widgets update, right? And you can see, for example, this one on the left has the actual points, and they're color coded by strength, as you can see here. So this is the point with the highest evil score in the entire Tesla Gigafactory in Austin, and of the entire Austin, right? And this has a precision of something like 28 feet, right? So this is the place that they use to communicate, right? Well, you say, well, why is it a green space, like a land with no building? Well, because that's exactly what they need, so they can move the antenna, a few meters to the right, a few meters. So they need that kind of flexibility, right? And you will see this if you play with the dashboard a lot. In fact, you can see it here, right? Like a lot of the points fall on the ocean, and there's a reason for that. The ocean, with a boat, you can move around and you can position the antenna in exactly the way you need, right? And then there's 2 tables on the bottom that the one on the left shows you the actual location and the evil score. So see, this is the actual location, latitude and longitude with the evil score. And then it shows you the qubit. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit. So this is a new notion that I'm introducing. And it's basically a grid, okay? So the idea is, until now, I'm scoring locations that are marked in the index. But I find it also very useful for debugging and for analysis to score entire areas, okay? So imagine that I take the planet Earth and I partition the terrain in a grid of squares that measure exactly 1 decimal latitude degree by 1 decimal longitude degree. Okay, so that square is what I call a MOSQ qubit. Qubit. And MOSQ, well, to honor the genius that created this monstrosity. So the idea being, right, once you partition the Earth in that way, you can then zoom all the evil scores inside of each qubit, and then we can rank the qubits, right? And then find not only what are the most, say, evil locations, right? That's a way to say it. That's my way of saying that it's an important location for this criminal enterprise, right? When I say it's an evil location, I don't mean that figuratively. What I mean is that it's an important location for this criminal enterprise. So that's a way for me to rank entire areas, right? So with that in mind, I created different levels of partitioning, right? So I have the qubits, I have the MOSQ by qubits, that, as you would imagine, it's the same idea, but instead of being 1 decimal degree of latitude by longitude, it's 2 decimal degrees of latitude by longitude. I also have the MOSQ quad qubits, which is 4 decimal degrees by 4 decimal degrees, and I have the octoqubits, which is 8 decimal degrees by 8 decimal degrees, right? So I have different granularities of partitioning the Earth, and then I can rank these squares and understand, where is the concentration of importance of power, or whatever force is that they're trying to manipulate with these places. It could be money, right? Like there's places that they have marked where they're banks, or they're places where they exchange money. For example, near the Bahamas, they have a few places where they basically transfer money to boats in those places. So in that case, the force they're manipulating is money, right? Smuggling money into the U.S. or taking money out of the U.S., right, without paying taxes. we have filters for the qubits, right? So for example, if I go to New York, to the example of New York that I have already opened, no, this is Venezuela. I have New York open here, right? So if I open this filter, you will see it has 2 biqubits, right? Because in this area that I have selected for this label, it falls into, I don't know, an area of maybe 3 degrees of latitude or longitude, and then therefore it produces this you know, 2 different biqubits. But if I go to quad qubits, it's only 1, right? Because of course we're able to contain it within 1 partition only, right? But if I show you the example for Venezuela, for example, which is here, if I open the biqubits, there's more because, well, it's a bigger area, and then there's the quad qubits, right? So for example, if I clicked on this, which is the most evil, so to speak, quad qubit in Venezuela, right? Then it will update all the widgets, and I will see even in this table, right? These are the locations that are restricted to that quad qubit, and within that quad qubit, this is the most evil location, so to speak, right? So that's that. The other filter that I wanted to talk about. No, actually, let me use this other example to show you that. It's very interesting. So this is New York. Okay, so this is the label of New York, and I know that there's a concentration of I think it's 116 million evil. Yes, 116 million. Sorry, it's a bit slow, and you know this demo is not scripted. I wanted to make it live. Yeah, 116 million, right? So for example, this I just want to show this technique of debugging to find the interesting places. And by the way, this is what the pipeline does automatically when it finds things like there was a post recently in which it found a subterranean bunker in Iran near the border with Afghanistan, right? And I'm going to describe what the pipeline does to do those kind of things. So for example, right, so you have a target area, in this case New York, and you know that by looking at this table that the top location is this location, right? Latitude 40.941, longitude minus 73.69525. So these filters on the top have the latitudes and the longitudes, right? So for example, if I look up that latitude here, it happens to be at the top, but not necessarily, right? Because it could be other point that could make it so it's not the top. But in this case, it is, right? 4941. So I'm going to select that, right? And so basically, it's going to restrict to all the points. So this is, look at this. This is beautiful, right? This one on the left, this map on the left. So what it's telling you, right? It's restricting to only the places that fall on that specific latitude. And you can see how they have different scores because they have different importances, right? But the one that is most important is this one on the corner, right? And you're gonna see why I say this is beautiful. If you zoom in, right, you'll see what it is, right? It's a location in a corner, right, where there's no more land, and it's right on the water. And remember, all we're talking about here today are military positions, right? Like these are military positions. I mean, when I say military, I mean, and I should probably, go deeper on this. When I say that they're a paramilitary group, what I mean is that they are employing people that were military personnel in the past, maybe even active personnel in other countries. And they come to the US or they go to other countries. They are not dressed in uniform, but they are military personnel, right? So they may be dressed as civilians, but they are people with military training that have military skills, that know how to operate military equipment, and they're using all this to target civilians, right? That's what I mean. So in the case of this location, it's a location that falls right in the water. And, I look at the geographical features of the locations and I can't recognize, why they picked it. And you can zoom in on this map, and you can even see the vehicles and certain features, like for example the fact that it's right on the corner, that it's on the water. It has a lot of good properties for them. But what I wanted to say is the following, right? Like if you see how the points are distributed, and there's no more points on the right. It's a jump point, right? Like they're jumping from that location to something that could be maybe 300, 400 miles away, towards the east, right? Obviously. Why I say that? Well, because the strongest point is the one that is most on towards the east, right? If the idea was to jump to the west, then the strongest point would be actually on the west, right? But this, yeah, so this is and you can see in all this, right, the intelligent design that is behind this, because of course, right, like I imagine that they're already thinking, how they're going to defend against these allegations. Like they're going to say, well, yeah, this is a random, they didn't create this file, yeah. But like it's I think it's beyond reasonable doubt. I mean, you look at the Tesla gigafactories, right, accumulating all these points in all these strategic places. I mean, it's undeniable. Okay, so that's that. We talked about the most qubits. We talked about the scores. We talked about the locations, the feature locations on this drop down. By the way, I should mention that if you look at this list, right, like I put here some interesting places. Venezuela, Russia, Iran, China, Cuba. No, China, I didn't put it. I'll add it today. For some reason, I forgot about it. But this is very, very telling, right? Like for example, this is an anomaly that you see here. Look at this. Texas, the state of Texas, accumulates evil scores to the tune of something like 16 billion, right? That it's bigger than Germany's accumulated score. I mean, that doesn't make much sense, right? Like, I mean, Germany, I think it's in the G7 group. How can Texas, a state, basically, and yes, we produce oil. I'm in Texas, by the way. So yes, there's oil production. It's a powerful state within the U.S. But if you compare by any metric you choose, Texas to Germany, right? I think Germany. I mean, Germany it's a country that's been around for hundreds of years. I cannot see any explanation why Texas has such a high concentration of evil scores compared to countries like Germany or Cuba, right? Just in the Caribbean, and it's it's an important player in all this for sure. So the only explanation, there's two explanations, right? I think there's not explanations, but like two contributing factors. One is the geolocation, right? The same principle that we discussed before, that they use Venezuela as a routing point, a network routing point to route communications. Let me select Texas. To route communications, right? As we saw in this. Sorry, it's a bit slow. But if I zoom out, if it lets me, you can see it in this other map on the right, right? The location is such that it's very desirable, right? Well, the same thing happens with Texas in the U.S. It's a state that it's located basically in the center of the country, both on latitude and longitude. So it's an ideal point for routing communications, that's for sure. And the other reason, it's because Elon made it. It's his operational base, right? Like he's creating the center of the empire. It's Austin, right? So everything has to revolve around that. So I think that's the likely explanation. Anyhow, we talked about New York. We talked about all that, right? And I have this open over here. It's a bit slow, but the geographical features is the other thing I wanted to mention, and that you see, for example, if you look at the gigafactories and or in general, right? If you look at the important places that have these military type locations marked in the geo index, they have one thing in common, is that they're always surrounded by agricultural land or extensions of land that are considerable, like football stadiums and golf courses, things like that. And I believe that's a measure to protect their locations from the same thing that they're doing to the rest of the world. And I've seen this before in many other examples. I even have a name for it. I call it the immune entities pattern. That's what I call it. And what that means is that when they know that they're attacking, or that they have a method, right, a systematic method of attacking something, they always seem to make sure that they protect their properties or their people or whatever it is that they want to protect against that type of attack, right? And I've seen this in many, many different instances. Even some of them are documented on the legal record, right? There's a famous or infamous, I don't know, case in which Travis Kalanick, he got sued on 2014, among other people from Uber, right? He got sued by Lyft and the CEO and all those people because they were spying on Lyft in the same way that they are spying on us today. And in the lawsuit, and I have this published on the website already, in the lawsuit it's mentioned that the allegations that Lyft made, they said that Travis Kalanick, he figured out that the Lyft application had a weakness. That was that the driver's ID, so each driver in the system had an ID, an identifier, right? They say that the identifier was stable, meaning that the ID of the driver, say it's a number, right? Like say Rinaldo is a driver and the number is 1234. That's my ID, okay? So in Lyft, my ID was always 1234, and this was a weakness because when Travis Kalanick and their spies, what he would do, he would send spies to follow the drivers of Lyft, and once they were close to the driver, physically close, with an interception device, they would capture the traffic from his phone or her phone, right? And in that traffic, once they decrypted it, they were able to see the identifier. And because they could see the plate of the car, then they had a way to tie the car to this identifier that never changed, right? So the lawsuit alleges that they identified that weakness, and they made sure that when they designed Uber, they made it so the identifiers change every 6 hours or something like that, every 10. I don't recall what number of hours, but they made sure that Uber identifiers for the drivers change over time, so to not have the same weakness, right? What I'm trying to say is that they do have this way of thinking that when they identify that they can damage, somebody, they can attack something in a certain way, they always make sure to protect their interests so they cannot be attacked in the same way, right? And this is a pattern that I've seen many, many times. Just posing one example to explain what I mean, but I've seen this at least 12 or 14 times in very important things. So I'm saying this because in these locations that are important to them, there's always a lot of land right next to the location. And I believe this is just a way so people cannot eavesdrop, like if the FBI or the Mossad or whoever is might be interested in investigating them. They won't be able to eavesdrop as easily because, well, if a car stands in there, they have the place under surveillance, right? And they will see that there's a car in there that is not their car, and they will look into it, right? So I think it's a protection measure. But if you look at those places, like for example the New York, right? So the water and the things that it has around, it has all those features. And if you look at the gigafactories, right? They look a lot like the surrounding area looks a lot like that area of West Los Angeles where Robert Gates has his house, right? Or had he, because I know there was a fire recently, so maybe. I don't know. Maybe I don't know if it's still there, but the area, like the geographical features of the areas, it's something that repeats. It's something that can be detected, right, with technology. Anyhow, so I'll stop it for now. But just wanted to give people an idea of what can be done and some tips on how to exploit this technology. Also, I want to say I'm going to make the data that it's powering this dashboard is of course going to be available for free. It's an open data set that I'm going to publish on the website on a downloadable form, and also I'm going to publish it. It's already published actually on the BigQuery data set that it's open and free, and anybody can query it in BigQuery. So if you want to play around with it, go crazy. Well, have a great day. Bye.